Evening, everybody. Uh, I've been trying. I mean, obviously, I'm debating Friday streams altogether, but until I make a firm decision on it, I figure I might as well carry on um, the usual habit. Um, but I kind of know that a late start usually doesn't bode well for interaction. Um, but on the other hand, I have work. I have a big commute, so this is the time I could get started. And we will jump into Cyberpunk today. So we finished the party. Actually had, I don't know if it quite is a twist, but definitely new dimensions to Songbird's situation. And am I coded for Cyberpunk? I am. Um, But yeah, I am kind of interested in where the story is going. Although I think at this point I am willing to spend a little bit more time on side quests because I believe we need time for Solomon to get his act together. Um, that's actually not a huge hardship because I did want to collect a few more cars, and I did have some fun with the boxing and stuff like that. So we'll see where we are in the playthrough. And in terms of outside options, depending on how the evening goes, I mean, there are other games that I can play. There seemed to be some attention to Dead Space, I noticed. But on top of that, I have generally not had a lot of success doing writing streams. However, I do have a piece that I've written and would like to do some editing before I send it out. And so if there is any interest in that, that is another option we can do if people are not feeling like Phantom Liberty is the best use of the time. But either way, I hope you all are well, and we can enjoy some Cyberpunk together. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the log. Oops. So we've got birds with broken wings. Go to Alex's safe house. Always thought it was, always thought it was in showbiz that you couldn't trust a soul. Turns out, in hindsight, met a few good eggs in my time. But man, all these cloaks from Langley, guaranteed dagger in the back. Probably stuck there by a friend. You're getting played here, no doubt about it, but not much choice with our survival on the table. Just do me a favor, ears perked, eyes peeled, and mind always, always razor fucking sharp. Okay, we've got meeting with Takamura. Now, this is the main game in sort of base Cyberpunk, and obviously I've done this already, so we're going to leave that aside. Ghost Town, likewise, dealing with the main quest. Yes. Okay. I'm curious about Swedenborg Riviera. To write that kind of nonsense, you've got to have a good head. Humanity is nothing but a pyramid scheme hidden behind a facade of tears. Well, fuck me. What's this guy on? And what can I get? Where can I get some? So I'm not opposed to trying that one. We've got Tomorrow Never Knows. Ask Misty about the new tarot cards you found out. It's another round of mystery murals, huh? Let me read your future. You're walking down some street in Watson. You see a shop, Misty's Esoterica. There's a chick inside. See her spewing some mumbo-jumbo theories about what your special third eye managed to spy. I think I got a real knack for this fortune-telling stuff. Tiberiosity, good to see you. Hey, Chalk here to lurk while you go off and do a couple of work calls. Thank you very much for the lurk, Tiberiosity. I don't think I have anybody to shout you out to, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I know you are a big Cyberpunk fan yourself, so probably not doing anything you haven't seen before, and I appreciate the hello. But I hope the work calls are not too too draining. I don't know. I'm happy with my new job, so but I have not missed out, or I've not forgotten what it's like to work at something that is a bit of a drag. So I always hope for the former for people. Okay, I'm mildly tempted to do the Badlands race, but that is sort of out of the way. Epistrophe will leave for another time. X Factor, right? That's Judy's mission. Yeah. I'm going to save that. And then I can check on the map for Psycho Killer. So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to visit Misty because that's not a huge sort of drain on my time. I'll call about Swedenborg. And I kind of figured, depending on kind of how the day goes. So, like, if I see you're honestly just tired of the work, body's breaking. I understand that. I'm kind of lucky that I would count as a knowledge worker now, and I have for a few years. But I have had more than one job where, like, just at the end of the day, your body hurts, right? You are tired, and I think it's kind of good that I had that experience. I'm like, if people knew what I looked like, I am a very, very skinny guy. So it is kind of amusing that I would have anything even remotely close to that. But I do actually kind of, I'm kind of happy that I've had that experience because obviously, you know, I prefer the job where I think. I'm not even necessarily any less tired after doing it. You know, because like thinking about stuff for a very long time is its own kind of draining. But yeah, I don't know. Like it is definitely a perspective that I've gained, and not necessarily one that I would have. I imagine that if I just kind of started off in some kind of office work, I would. I'd have a very different conception of like what work is. Cured, good evening, System Doc. You can stick around tonight. Going to be lurking on Disco Elysium. Oh, you're playing Disco Elysium. Is this your first time playing it? Oop.
Nance, I can't come to the hollow right now. If I feel like it, I'll call you back. Bye.
I seem to recall. Oh, we're in a completely different job. Yeah, I believe one of my first losses was to sitting on a particularly uncomfortable chair. Oh no, there is Misty's. Oh right, I forgot. I thought this gate was up here. Is she just not going to talk to me because I haven't done the other part of the mission, maybe?
But you are not the masters of your memory. For your eyes do not belong.
You had twice grabbing the tie and then once inspecting some shoe prints. Yeah. I'll confess, I'm not crazy.
Got a few questions about Silverhand and his chip.
I'm no expert, but fire away. See what I can do.
Why am I reliving Johnny's memories?
You two share a brain now. He has access to your senses, perceptions, even some memories. Likewise, you've got a glimpse into his. After a while, you won't even know whose is whose.
Listen, don't laugh, but been seeing some weird shit around town. Like murals or something. But I know they're not real.
Just a Kuroshi blip. Could take a look.
No. The images are too complex for a blip. It's like they're symbols.
That case is the biochip. Brain can't handle the data overload. Either that, or it's reached the cortex.
Can you do anything?
Nope. Better find a way to get rid of that chip.
Sorry about that, but yeah. So the I'm not 100% sure how I feel about the willingness of the game to like just straight up kill you off. I think at the beginning it's kind of funny because, you know, it's like it's low stakes. You haven't lost a whole lot, but once you've gotten a little bit involved in the game, particularly if you're like me and you like kind of experiencing everything, they do make it really easy to die to things that are quite unexpected. And I mean, people really, really like that game for a good reason. I'm not gonna, you know, take a sandwich board or something like that and like protest outside ZAUM's offices or something like that. But it is one of these things where I remember actually hearing an interview with Sid Meier, and apparently he has this tendency to, or actually maybe it wasn't with Sid Meier, but it was about Sid Meier. I've heard both, but apparently he does have a tendency to talk to his designers, and when they're getting a little too into all of the, you know, the simulation or all of the things going on in the background, he just asks, you know, and who's having fun? So I do have a sort of feeling that sometimes the you know, the absurd deaths in some games are not necessarily about the player having fun.
How's biz going?
Can't complain. Corporals learn to keep their distance, and Sokka's back hiring lone mercs. They all gotta have the newest, shiniest implants.
Good thing you got Misty here to help. Handles your griping well.
Yeah, renting out her shop's the best decision I ever made.
You know what? Seems like you're the only person in Night City who's happy with this lot.
You get to a certain age, you drop all your illusions. Life just gets easier from there.
So biochip. Think Militech could help with it? That within the realm of possibilities?
Why Militech of all things?
Someone recently spilled about some classified tech they have. Kind that could, you know, cure me. The kind of neural matrix that harnesses AIs from out past the Black Wall.
If someone actually did tame one, it'd be promising. Albeit suspiciously so.
Suspicious how?
Read the scream sheets. Anything from beyond the Black Wall leaves only crisp corpses and destruction in its wake. Dangerous and unpredictable. Then again, I'm not privy to the wonders the dark wizards at Militech have at their disposal.
Think it'd be worth a shot?
I'd say so, sure. You need all the options you can get.
Okay. So I'll try Misty one more time, and if it doesn't work out, yeah. So I'm guessing either intentionally or because of unexpected behavior, I'm not able to talk to Misty. We can always try that later. That was nice of everybody to wait for my car. Okay, let's see what we can do. What else we can do in the journal. I guess Badlands race. So you're waiting for a date with Claire and her turbocharged pet beast away from the city's hustle and bustle. I wonder how many bodies have been left in the, to bake in the Badlands. Excuse me, Badlands sun after these races. Just do me a favor and don't become one. Watch out for tumbleweeds, bumpy patches, armored wraith trucks. You know, the usual. So to be honest, for 3:50 a.m., I imagine I'm probably going to lose a day here. But, I don't know. I kind of like to do... I don't like the idea of just, like, crashing through a main story, particularly when there are interesting side quests. Oop. Speaking of... I'm going the wrong way. So there might be a second condition. They don't always come up immediately, but I think I might be clear, and I'm kind of happy about that because I've already kind of damaged the car, and I'd really rather not have to deal with follow-ups. Hey, Nearly Logical. Stressful Friday. What's happened to you? Okay, I can live with this. Oh, and Cured, sorry, I didn't see the racing quest. So I've done the first one. I can't remember if I had to reset on that first one or not, but I'm pretty sure I've done all of the racing quests. It's a little hard for me to remember because I didn't finish the main game before Phantom Liberty came out, and I started a new one as recommended. Finally upgraded your computer. Sorry, just need to... and it went wrong in so many ways. Now you're scared of it. So, like, obviously you're able to watch the stream now. Like, is it... I've definitely crash landed a couple of upgrades where I'm able to have the thing function, and then I just sort of, like... I've had a computer that's, like, half open, and, like, pieces are sort of almost falling out of it. But, you know, like, posts have got, you know, the OS is loading and things like that. So I just kind of accept, I just kind of accept it for a little while before I feel in the mood to go any further. But what's, do you mind if I ask what's happened? Did you help her complete the race or complete her goal? Gross. I don't think those are mutually exclusive, but I did not get to the... I do not believe I got to the finish line in the one that I did. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I let her do what she wanted. I'm going to be rather upset if the police are the reason I can't turn in the quest. Jesus, yeah. So I gotta admit, I think the police is like, it's a nice touch, but it really kills these missions. Like, there's absolutely no reason for it.
Instructions were clear as day. You only did part of the gig. You only get part of your cut.
Hang on, gotta go.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Could have been better, V. Much better. But I'll take the hit. In a forgiving mood for once. Thanks for the help, V. My chum will do the finishing touches.
But yeah, like if you wind up with the police on your tail, there's absolutely nothing you can do but wait it out. Which, I mean, I suppose, you know, there's the obvious answer. Don't have the police come after you, but easier said than done. Anyway, let's do Beast of Eden. So it's motherboard, PSU, GPU swap. That alone took for, yeah. I absolutely hate, like, I haven't done that many builds, but I feel like every time I've done one, I've always had to replace the mother. Actually, the worst one for me was there was one where I didn't have to just replace the motherboard, but I had to, or main board or whatever they call it. But I also had to, like, the RAM was different, so it was almost like building a new computer. But yeah, like I really any time I have to change just that fundamental layer, it's always a complete pain. I have debated just like going to a shop and have like making it their problem, because it's just like I just value my time. I haven't actually done it, but it's tempting. So I'm guessing when you say that everything's going wrong, you did the work and then something doesn't seem right. Yeah, then GPU's 3090 that a friend hadn't used, so you got it cheap. Good to hear. But hell, that is a heavy hot thing. And with the 4090 melting connectors, I'm just paranoid of those. Oh, I did not hear of that, incidentally. Makes me happy I'm running an old card.
Hey, Claire. Next race. You ready?
It'll be a tough one. Off-road, lots of lead flying. We'll take Beast. I want to try her out in the field.
Nova. FYI, I'm already here.
Perfect. Join you in a sec.
Sounds good. See ya.
So it's almost 5 in the morning.
You are receiving us.
I mean, I don't think that's completely unfounded. I understand the numbers, but I do think there's a certain point where you can say, like, depending on who you're dealing with, you don't necessarily know, if the manufacturer is going to accept your version of events. Like, I don't want to make a big deal out of this, because every time I say this, people always say the same things. Like, well, it didn't happen to me. It's like, okay, great. So I guess based on your experience with this merchant, I should just continue going on and accept responsibility for, for their screw up. But I have not shopped at Amazon in a few years now. And this is because I bought a camera from them. It was actually my very first digital camera. And when it was delivered, what was inside the package was receipt paper. This was actually quite an expensive camera. So, I take photos of the state of the box. I take, I get everything that I can together, call customer service immediately and inform them about what's happened. And without going into like all of the details or that, I was left in this situation where I think, without anybody explicitly saying it, they did not believe me. They felt that I had replaced it with receipt paper. It did not seem that any of the individual divisions were connecting with each other. And one of the things, like, so you hear these stories about Amazon being a customer-obsessed company, but the fact of the matter is that if you are on the other side of that, if they think that you are trying to pull something on them, it is actually an incredibly difficult company to work with. They close off communications avenues. Like if you call, they actually disable the option to call again. It is very difficult to get someone on the phone a second time. Now, in the end, I was able to get reimbursed, but it was basically a manager using their discretion. Like, I'm pretty sure on paper somewhere in terms of their database, I'm basically someone who got away with stealing a camera from them, or whatever the designation would be. Because I mean, again, it's like basically just it's I'm assuming just like the petty cash amount that a person at a certain level of customer service went for. And so the thing is, like, I used to buy quite a few computer parts on Amazon, but the fact that, this admittedly rare occurrence, right? You don't hear this happening with people a lot, and I'm sure everybody else in here has had nothing but good experiences with Amazon. But the fact of the matter is, for me to have any positive probability of having something not delivered and being on the hook for it means that the scope of packages I am willing to order from Amazon has now basically fallen to about $20 or $30. And frankly, I actually just don't like the way they treated me. So I'm like, I don't mind ordering in, local, right? I've got an independent bookstore that's a couple blocks away from me, so I usually just order in with them, and it's maybe $2 or $3 more. So yeah, I remember that, Kieran. So, like the fact of the matter is that I'm actually quite sensitive to this idea of like, it's 0.1. The 0.1%, that 0.1% is still a meaningful number. And if you are in that group, like essentially you just kind of need to ask yourself, like, can you actually take that sort of hit to your finances? And like for me, if I was getting a GPU, no, I could not buy, like, there is a reason I don't run dual GPUs, right? That is a thing that I buy once and I expect it to run for a certain period of time. And if it doesn't, so like, if it's got the expected life, I save up enough to get a replacement. And if it runs for shorter than that, it is possible that I just don't have one on my computer. And clearly, as far as streaming is concerned, that's a non-starter. So, anyways, some of the case fans didn't start spinning. Windows created a bad UEFI, still haven't figured out. I am sorry to hear that, Nearly Logical. That sounds like a real pain.
See you again.
Got another race to run, huh?
Second of 4, I hope. Ready to go off-road?
It's not a fan-friendly event, is it?
Who'd want to bake in this sun?
Speed, carnage, a crunching metal symphony? Yeah, dull stuff. Think this one will be tough?
Badlands, so no fucking around. Anything goes in this race.
So you'll have your hands full.
You too. One mistake and we'll be a 4-ton tumbleweed.
I can do this.
Okay, I'm just gonna melt under that sun, so gonna wait in the car.
Sure.
Hey guys, remember! Maximum madness!
I don't have it. Well, how am I supposed to know who's got it?
It won't be Cyberpunk nearly logical. You'll enjoy The Witcher 4.
Gentlemen, get your pants on
Bully
right.
is a
Strap
fantastic
in
shot.
and fire up your engine.
He is.
30 seconds and counting.
Too much. You hear me?
Ignore him. Luigi tries to get in people's heads.
Hey, you!
So next time I
Yeah?
actually
What's
don't
up?
make it, there's
Just
duct
wanted
tape in
to
the
wish
trunk.
you luck!
Just saying.
Thanks.
Three, two, one.
This is my fight.
Sacre bleu! Yeehaw! This also slightly feels like gravity is optional at this point. Oh Jesus! There we go. Yeah, I felt like the camera was a little too far away, so. Not even halfway. Oops.
Fuck, sandstorm. Careful, V.
Damn it! I have a real talent for sabotaging my runs.
Take him down.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember. I don't remember things being as bouncy at the start, but what on earth is she shooting at? Okay, 10 checkpoints, and then we're good. Oh, and I'm missing a door. Cool. It's nice to see that pile up in the rearview mirror. Oh no! God damn it! Suppose I'll at least give myself the ability to recover. It's not my finest hour, but we're 3 away. And it doesn't look like there's too many nasty turns. There might be one to the right. Nope, we're good.
Winners today, free and clear!
We did it, B! We won!
Wasn't easy.
Drive up to the finish line.
Fuck. What shortcut? That is race terrain. You lost him? Oh, God. Spare me from these fucking children.
How am I doing?
Come back. But this
You're
time,
too
don't
wide
fucking
around corners
run.
and slow down the last straightaway, but I'm nitpicking.
So, no regrets putting me behind the wheel?
Thank you, Kieran.
Not yet.
Your last driver is better than I am?
He was a good husband, an amazing wheelman.
So you're racing for him.
He adored this shit. Had a keen mind for machines, unmatched. He could talk to him. When he got behind the wheel, it was like he fused with it. But just him. No implants.
What do you say we win this for him?
I'm counting on you. You want a lift to my garage?
Sure, thanks.
Let's go.
I can't remember if there's any dialogue, but I'm definitely going to be amused to watch the doorless ride home.
I gave you an easy pass. Ah, of course. Let it. You were responsible for that motorcycle. No, you don't dare.
This definitely does not sound in good shape. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. So obviously I've kind of told the story about, you know, how many, or not how many, but I've kind of told at least why I think a lot of the cyberpunk corporations are, you know, are Japanese, and how they sort of owe their origins to a set of business practices that were adopted in Japan but were introduced following World War II by someone who originally worked at the U.S. Census, W. Edwards Deming. I mean, telling that story a couple of times, I might just get out of the car at this point if we're going to get stuck. I am kind of curious how the game resolves this, though. Hope you like the song. It solves it through violence. Yeah, so I don't mind telling that story, but I also kind of feel like people who've been watching since the beginning might like to hear something new. One of the stories I was meaning to talk about was something that I read in Bloomberg about how Japan sort of finished its... they had a pretty unique monetary policy. It was sort of, I think, negative real interest rates for... I don't even remember the specific details in terms of the length or exactly what was going on, but there is a degree of prosperity that the country hasn't seen. Well, sorry, maybe that's not quite the right way to put it, but there's sort of a type of activity in financial markets that hasn't really been something that the country has experienced in a few decades. And what's kind of interesting is that because of all this activity and things like the bond market, they're actually bringing people back. I think this is the song that was played during the whatchamacallit, the party, the Grimes piece. I'm assuming it's Grimes' thing, because I know that's who plays Lizzie Wizzy. Anyway, but yeah, so apparently in this article that I read, they're bringing back the sort of the financial markets, like the traders basically, from that boom time that that essentially is what inspired a lot of this, a lot of sort of the conception of cyberpunk as we have it today. And again, these are all reflect. I mean, there's just a number of very popular works that wound up affecting it, and I don't think it's coincidental, incidentally, that you have, you have a certain set of authors in particular locations also driving this. But yeah, in any case, it was kind of an interesting follow-up. This is a couple months ago now, but it's a little funny to hear that basically it has been such an extended period in which they've been recovering from this this slower period in terms of their financial markets, that they need to go back to this. Essentially, they don't necessarily have the talent pool that you would normally expect, and instead that they're drawing from these people of sort of the era where you see, movies like Wall Street being made. Obviously, Wall Street was not a Japanese film, but just trying to think if there was another other detail on this. Oh, actually, one that I don't know how many. I don't know how much, if this would count as news for anybody, but I did pick up. There's is it 35th anniversary edition? Anyways, there's a new edition of Snow Crash that was released. So I only read Snow Crash after, long after it had been released. So I have sort of a nice. It's a nice enough paperback edition, but it is a. It's the only type that I could find, and sometimes it's nice to have like a good hardcover version of something that you really like. Just it's nice to have a nice version of a book, and it's not that paperbacks are terrible, but it's a taste thing. I'm not working a minimum wage job anymore, so sometimes it's nice to get the nice version of something. So anyways, this I actually really like the cover for this new edition of Snow Crash, and it's kind of funny. Stevenson's relatively brief for the introduction in that one. He talks, it mostly just kind of leaves it to the afterword, and all of the other references that have sort of talked about Snow Crash. I imagine to his mind, there isn't a lot more that needs to be said about at least the origins of that particular book. I looked it up, and apparently there's also a special edition sword. I think there was like a katana that they made for it, but it was a one of a kind. This thing's gonna be put into an auction, and I have to assume that Snow Crash is probably very popular among the Silicon Valley crowd. So I have been priced out of that particular auction. Assuming that it was even still going on. All right, that was a bumpy. Thanks, Claire. That was a particularly bumpy ride home, but there you have it. But yeah, anyways, for those of you that have not read it, so Neuromancer is probably the one that was, well, Neuromancer and Blade Runner are probably the two big influences that continue to sort of have or continue to kind of have an outsized influence on everything. Snow Crash gets a special mention now because of the kind of current push towards the metaverse. That is the book that actually coined that term. And but what I like about that one, so first of all, it definitely feels like a very 90s kind of book. But on top of it, there's a lot going on in it, but I also sort of like how it doesn't take itself so seriously. And I think this is one of the things we've talked before about. I've kind of talked before about this idea in terms of science fiction, where everything's sort of a dystopia now, and there's a bit of a movement in science fiction to push back from that and go back to maybe the older idea of writing constructive science fiction. Let's say it's not, something that you might aspire to, even if you are dealing with, danger or other problems. This is, I think, one of the things that's difficult about these kinds of conversations is that you can't necessarily say, okay, let's just go back to the old ways and pretend the new stuff didn't happen. I mean, maybe if you really truly feel like you are in some sort of cul-de-sac, you can do that. But I don't entirely think when you see sort of a development, and especially one that sort of has a certain persistence, there are, better or worse periods in terms of literature or any kind of creative form. But I'm not entirely sure there's one where you say, okay, we just completely reject this. We're just going to pretend that it never happened. Usually it's either a reaction to or pushing past, or essentially just not sort of going. So, you don't, actually a decent example of this would be when I'm listening to classical music, there are definitely some periods that I find quite challenging. So Arnold Schoenberg kind of feels like a classical music boss fight. But only some types of it, right? So other type, I think the style that he gets referred, or that is usually used in reference to him, is serialism. But not all of his stuff is like that. And it is a very, very, like his style and his theories were very influential, and influential in unexpected places. You have things like cartoons, like Looney Tunes, using techniques developed in that period. Now, probably not quite where the innovators thought that it was going, but the fact of the matter is that it worked very well for what those cartoons were trying to do. And I think there's something quite admirable about people taking those techniques and using them in novel ways. But I think you can take inspiration from what came before, and I think you can react to maybe a particular movement, because there's lots of things that people do and take for granted that are due for revision or reconsideration. But to just pretend that it hasn't happened, I sort of feel like keeps you, taking yourself out of the conversation isn't necessarily the way that you're going to maybe push that frontier forward. Assuming that that's something that you want to do. I mean, sometimes it's enough to just be competent, right? Anyways, there was a point I was trying to make with this, but like, one of the things that I think would be the case in terms of the science fiction stuff would be, you want to at least acknowledge that, like, there's a reason why people were talking about dystopias, and there's maybe a reason why people find those compelling. But on the other hand, what can we do, sort of knowing that this has been the science fiction that we've been reading for a very long period of time, so much so that some people feel that this is having an effect, a real world effect, in terms of what people's ambitions are in terms of developing things. I think I might try Misty again. How do we acknowledge that while still going back to some sort of a type of writing that gives people something to shoot towards, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. So Snow Crash probably wouldn't qualify as that, just simply because it Cyberpunk wasn't something that had been established at the time. Like, it was around. It wasn't the first one, but it was definitely not a... Oops.
Keep back.
Well, nuts.
Put some heart into it! Kill!
Okay, can't system collapse. Alright, well, I tried to be nice. So anyways, what I was trying to say, one of the things that I dislike the most about either a tendency towards dystopia or these kinds of stories are that I feel there's a few too many stories that take themselves too seriously. And what's neat about Snow Crash is that it is actually a book about some pretty serious stuff. It is definitely, it definitely goes into some really interesting subject matter that I don't think anybody could say is, you know, light. But that doesn't stop the book from having a main character named Hero Protagonist, or, you know, having, you know, just a lot of.
One last thing. This machine needs some condition.
Okay. You know, it doesn't stop it from having some fun with its material, which again is not always something that you can take for granted in a lot of stories today. And this does actually remind me of something that came up in a so there's a writers group that I'm part of now, and we were specifically talking about science fiction, and I did sort of bring up the Hieroglyph project and sort of this idea of an effort within science fiction to sort of acknowledge that the types of stories that have been told have largely been dystopias or unpleasant, or essentially they've not necessarily given people things to strive for, and that is somewhat unique in the history of science fiction, because, you know, you've got H.G. Wells, who is certainly credited with sort of foreseeing a number of inventions. Although I think it's also reasonable to, you know, to say that perhaps it is through stories that talk about these wonderful things that people feel inspired to do them. Plenty of stories about Apple in terms of, you know, Steve Jobs using something like the Jetsons to describe some of the technology that they're developing in terms of a goal to move towards. It's hard to imagine things like tablets or Wikipedia or that without, you know, having some conception of that in the form of something like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Again, and I don't mean to suggest that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the reason we have Wikipedia. Obviously, encyclopedias existed before Wikipedia. But it is also fair to say that a culture that produces ideas like that is probably more likely to see those ideas become a reality once the technology becomes available. And what I found very interesting, and also a little discouraging, although I kind of need to consider the source in this case, but one of the people present offered that we're seeing so many dystopias because of the current state that we... amazingly, this counts as good conditions still. That essentially it's the conditions we find ourselves in that, you know, that's led to all of these dystopias. So, you know, this idea that basically we're living in such a benighted time that, you know, Thank you very much, Nearly Logical. I appreciate that you have found my performance satisfactory. I'm glad that I've passed the beginning of quarter review. I appreciate you continuing to sub. Thank you very much for that. I'm glad you are diverted enough to find that worth supporting. And I do hope your computer, if only else so I can continue to have a viewer. I hope your I do hope you're... Oh, I didn't notice that we're in the middle of a dangerous situation. It seems like it's an opportunity for me to have a little fun. Oh, I am in trouble. Okay, that's a little more realistic for me to manage. Completely fair. But yeah, anyways, because the person is not here, I will speak a little more freely than I would have in the meeting. I hear stuff like this all the time, and it frustrates me a lot, right? We're just at such a benighted age that writers have no option but to write dystopias, and I think this is completely misunderstanding what we expect of... I have no idea why I pinged instead of distracted. Oh my god, I did it again. There we go. Yoink. But yeah, I just need to think, when is the last time you've heard about or talked about a really good writer, particularly ones who do actually live in periods of great great strife, and you say, yes, they wrote exactly what everyone else was saying at the time. They had no ideas beyond what was, directly in front of them. And this is why we celebrate them as a creative force. There is something to be said about writers that are able to speak to the moment, who are able to maybe see a little bit further than people, or to be able to give a particular kind of expression to a time. So I don't want to deny that there is, that you can work in difficult times, and this is going to be really tough to do. So I kind of need to sync this up, and I think I can do it, but nope, I screwed it up. Hey, Seasoned. I'm just ranting like I normally am, but it's partly because of a writers group that I was going in. But I was trying to talk a little bit about dystopias, and specifically an effort. Welcome, by the way. Definitely feel free to contribute in the discussion if you find something interesting. But yeah, so but I am going to read the conversation here. Gavin Kaczynski and Adam Giles. The dealer cunt said no. You fucking believe it? Here I am, a paying customer, and she says no. Fucking cunt suddenly all prim and proper like she's too good for me. You gotta teach her a lesson. Wipe the bitch. She's a Tigers dealer. Good girl. Leave her alone. I'm Gavin fucking Kaczynski. Does that mean nothing anymore? I said zero her. Your father won't like this. Your job is to follow orders. I gotta say who we're with? Who you do biz with on the side? Okay, I'll do it, but it'll come back to bite us. I mean it. Fuck it, I don't care. Sorry, I completely butchered the delivery of that, but there you go. But yeah, so there's maybe just to give a bit of an idea in terms of where this is. I started off talking about Snow Crash, which would definitely count as a cyberpunk story and does actually count as a dystopia. But it's also worth remembering that the author behind that, Neil Stephenson, participated in a project called Hieroglyph. And that was very specifically an effort on the part of science fiction authors to get back to writing these kinds of more aspirational stories the sort of things. And again, the example I gave would be sort of Steve Jobs at Apple referring to the Jetsons when they're I don't think I can make this work. There we go. And again, take your pick. Star Trek, Hitchhiker's Guide, stories from H.G. Wells. And even if those individual examples are not necessarily something that you can draw that straight line to the creation of a particular technology from, I think there's something to be said about a culture that produces those kinds of works is more likely to produce the sorts of inventions that we take for granted and admire once the technology makes that available. So again, should we give Douglas Adams credit for Wikipedia? I mean, probably not, because encyclopedias existed prior to that. But I do think we would maybe see fewer. There's maybe we'd see maybe a delayed adoption, or maybe a different kind of adoption to these things. And I mean, again, you can say, well, maybe it's not Hitchhiker's Guide, maybe it's some of H.G. Wells stuff, because I think he's sort of credited as having something that looks very much like the internet, from the perspective of someone who, from the time that he would have been in. And again, the Hieroglyph Project was a series of short stories, as well as, I'm sure, the authors kind of went off and took that prompt. But essentially, there were a bunch of engineers who sort of took the authors out to the woodshed and said that it's their fault that we don't have any good ideas. We don't have anything that we want to implement. And I actually think that there's some truth to that. So I talked about this in a small writers group that I'm in at work, and the thing that really frustrated, it wasn't necessarily the fact that this one person said this, so much as you can speak for at least 30 on artist suffering versus perceived higher art status of negative emotions versus positive ones in writing. Well, tell you what, Nearly Logical, I'm going to go on a slight digression here, but I don't know if any of you know about All Souls College. But this will be I think this will be a worthwhile this will be worth one reading just for. Okay. I'll bring this up when I finish the previous thought, but this might be kind of fun. Aegis Sounder, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. But yeah, so where I was kind of trying to go with this was this case in terms of the writers group at work, where because I've heard this sentiment expressed in other places, just this idea that we're seeing dystopias because they reflect our current times, and so the dystopias are there basically because we're living in such a terrible time. And I would definitely say that we're not necessarily in a really, we're not in like the best of times. I still kind of follow Ovid's quote. I think he's kind of making was it Horace? I feel like he was poking fun possibly at Horace, but I could be wrong at. But let others praise. Oh no, sorry, I think it was Livy actually. Let others praise ancient times. I was born. I am glad I was born in these. Is kind of my feeling on this. But even like in terms of recent history, like I have to imagine that sort of the end of the Cold War and like the big sort of boom that happened after that, and the degree of optimism, I have to imagine would probably be a little more pleasant to live through than what we're in right now. But I also think there is a tendency to sort of see this as a uniquely terrible period, which I just don't think reflects any broader understanding of history. I think there have been far worse times. Although again, we should aspire to better, which is exactly the whole point of projects like Hieroglyph. So, and I think this is when season came in. Just this idea that, we somehow think that, somehow apparently the best that we can expect from authors is that they look around and see that everybody else is, just strikes me as such a depressing way of thinking about about creators, right? Very often we tend to praise these sorts of works precisely because they see something that everybody else is missing. And that can be dystopias, right? You know, you've got George Orwell writing in 1948, I think published in 1949, but you have 1984, which is probably not a prophecy of the future, but is definitely very preoccupied with language, its ability to shape thought. I mean, essentially, I think the key to really getting the most out of 1984 is to read it alongside politics and the English language, up to and including the fact that he clearly saw some political speech in which the reflection hit someone on the glasses so that their eyes looked pure white, because he uses that image both in politics and the English language and 1984. And I know a lot of people really like using 1984 and just focusing on the bootstepping on a human face forever. But I think what's really important is more about what you think in societies like that, and specifically the type of language that allows sort of the appalling to be justified. Anyways, I want to read a little bit of what chat said inside of this. But essentially, the reason why that just rubbed me so wrong is that I hear from a lot of people who really like to take up the mantle of being creators or being creative people. And it's not my place to sort of say who's creative and who isn't. But I really do see a lot of people who do this also talking about, you know, well, I would be better if, you know, my economic circumstances allowed me, or, you know, I just need to be able to dedicate all my time to my art, and, you know, and that's all that I need, and society should be structured in such a way to do this. And these are, to a certain extent, right, we all want things, and I don't think it's wrong to want to have these sorts of things. But I also know, like, you know, Geoffrey Chaucer was a civil servant as well as writing the Canterbury Tales, right? There's a lot of authors, actually, who have had day jobs and wind up producing these really great works. In fact, it almost feels now that sort of making a living writing is almost sort of something that is set aside for the wealthy, a little bit like it was in history, right? So, you know, if you're a journalist or if you're an author, like, sometimes you can write really popular stuff, but sometimes, you know, you're a professor at a university, and that gives you sort of the means to write. And so it's a little tough for me to look at people who are in situations like that and sort of say, it's like, oh yes, but, you know, the society we're in is just such a dark, you know, such a dark and terrible place that we, you know, we can't handle it. Anyway, sorry, I'm extending this beyond what I think people might necessarily agree with. So let me catch up with what was said in here. So, nearly logical. I can speak for at least 30 on art of suffering and perceived higher art status of negative emotions versus positive ones in writing. Season says, my impression is not that they reflect the time, but what could be ahead. I agree as well. And the same with inspirational sci-fi. But that's not a hill I'm going to die. No, I think you're going to a right place. Like, some of it can be a warning, and I think some of it can also be a, I mean, I've always thought that a good role for, by the way, it's not apparent right now, but I am trying to find something on the All Souls College exams, and I can't remember if it was a general or a literature question. Oh, here we go. All right. Although, well, I suppose I'd put to you this way, you probably wouldn't consider those works to be, like, creative writing, though. I imagine that you probably place those particular works in a different category than maybe what, like, a Dan Brown or, you know, William Blake is doing. Unless you put William Blake in very exalted company. Anyways. How do I go into this? Okay, so All Souls College they've changed the exam a little bit, but I think I'll rely on my good friend Wikipedia to get me started here. So All Souls College, official name, College of the Souls of All the Faithful Departed, is a constituent college of the University of Oxford in England. Unique to All Souls, all of its members automatically become fellows, i.e. full members of the college's governing body. It has no student members, but each year recent graduates at Oxford are eligible to apply for a small number of examination fellowships through a competitive examination, once described as the hardest exam in the world, and those shortlisted after the examinations and interview. Now, I am sorry to say that they actually seem to have gotten rid of a lot of the old examination papers, and there used to be these like single word prompts. But they do have at least some of the papers. So in this case, general paper 1, candidates should answer 3 questions, and you get your pick from 25. And then general paper 2, candidates should answer 3 questions, in this case, 29. And then there is a section on specialist papers. So classical studies, economics, English literature, history, law, philosophy, or politics. I noticed the economics ones are a little bit more, like they're not quantitative questions. They're definitely more like, more sort of about structures. I mean, it doesn't mean you definitely should probably have studied economics to answer them well, but they're not asking you to do math, basically. So anyways, general paper. And this is inspired by what Nearly Logical said, because you are in good company with this thought. So, quote, "The trouble is that we have a bad habit, encouraged by pedants and sophisticates, of considering happiness as something rather stupid. Only pain is intellectual, only evil interesting." Ursula Le Guin. Do you agree? So I think, I don't know if you were familiar with that. I don't know if you're familiar with that quote, Nearly Logical, but you are in good company. No, ever the contrarian. Oh, no, I was not. Okay. I was thinking you were maybe answering the question, do you agree? No. Or maybe you were. Some of you may also know I've actually read the essay that this is from. So when we read, another person thinks for us. We merely repeat their mental process. Arthur Schopenhauer. Discuss. Oh, you were answering the question. All right, you're being contrary with your previous one. There's a couple of other fun ones here. So, would the capacity to lay eggs change the debate on abortion? To deny that Bach is better than Britney is simply to play into the hands of consumer capitalism. Discuss. Academics are like priests. They disguise truisms in jargon to claim authority over others. Discuss. Are AI tools such as ChatGPT changing the nature of knowledge? I actually answered this one on Reddit recently. There was one about, I got a coworker really worked up with one of these. It might be another general paper. 26. Defend whaling. I know, but I also want ChatGPT to go away so I can get technical proposals that don't involve using it. Okay, let's go back to general papers. Here we go. Hogwarts would have avoided problems with radicalization if it had been legally obligated to prevent extremism. Discuss. Okay, before we move on from All Souls, does anybody have a subject that we'd like to do a couple of questions out of? The specialist papers are classical studies, economics, English literature, history, law, philosophy, or politics. Politics is always so popular in Twitch chats. But we can get back to Cyberpunk. I just really wanted to riff off of what Nearly Logical was saying, because I think that Ursula Le Guin quote was I at least took it as similar to what was being expressed in terms of this idea that we overemphasize the negative. You've recently stopped reading news as someone who always read the newspaper for decades. That's interesting. Is it because the content, like you did not like the style of coverage? Because I have noted, like there's a couple that I subscribe to either through work or through through my own my own payment, they generally have sort of the level of coverage that I want. But I have noticed that the quality of coverage has actually been on the decline for a bit. So I've complained about this a couple of times in terms of gaming content. I've read stuff that like Kotaku puts out, which uses more words to convey less information than something like the Wall Street Journal. And obviously the Wall Street Journal is not necessarily something that I'm going to find a lot of political alignment with. Not that I feel I need to politically align with a newspaper, but, you know, I'd be willing to say that, you know, the Wall Street Journal is not always a high bar to beat. Maybe more so the editorial page or opinion page. Like in terms of the business reporting, I think they're the ones who sort of broke the Theranos story. So as a cognitive decision, just wasn't interested anymore, rather cared enough anymore for one day. Oh, fair. I generally feel like I need or should keep myself better informed. It is something that I found a little difficult to keep on top of. I think I can probably just hop down and steal that car. I did that too early.
I got another moving target. Help it off the beaten path and right into my arms.
But yeah, I found that I do, like, I wish I was a little bit better at keeping on top of things, and there's definitely, I've found myself in more situations where I feel underinformed rather than I'm spending too much time reading it. But on the other hand, it's tough because, like, it is asking your time. Like, you know, it's the one thing that everybody's kind of given the same allotment for, and there's lots of things. There are a lot of things that are making demands on it, and usually things that are more effective than sitting down and reading printed words. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's any way that I can really close off the dystopia talk. One of the challenges I do sometimes run into, I think, is there is a tendency to, you know, take maybe a complaint about things like an overemphasis on dystopia or, you know, or similar issues. And, you know, immediately what happens is people will say, is that, oh, so you don't think there should be any dystopian literature? It's like, well, no, right? You know, that's not the same as saying that this is overrepresented in our creative output. But I will confess, I do actually worry a little bit in terms of the overall quality of what we are producing. And I have sort of conditions under which I think I could tell myself that I'm worrying about something that's, like, not a problem. So one example I could give you of this would be, it is possible that what I perceive as a decline in terms of the quality of our literature, and I'll use literature broadly, right? So this could apply to the stories that are being told in games. If you feel that games need to tell stories, I think there are a lot of people who don't feel that that's a requirement. Let's see what Romar wants.
Watch out, V. Hit someone up.
get out of a dangerous situation. Oh, I'm not gonna make it. Yeah. I shouldn't have tried to push that. You want the news, but you don't want to be scared into engagement. It's a harder line to toe than it should. Well, I also just tend to find that there is some difficulty in terms of there is some difficulty just in terms of trying to find where the attention should go. Like, there's a lot of things going on. So I'm not entirely sure if you quizzed me, I could tell you every country in which there is an armed conflict going on. You know, and that you'd almost kind of think would be the, like, that should be the easy mode on the news, right? Like, that's the sort of thing that, you know, you can imagine is like, oh yeah, when they say we're going to war, that's the exciting part of the movie. Obviously, that's not how wars work in the real world, but like, just as an example, right? Like, that's kind of the... Man, I really did not do myself any favors with my my health here. I think this is like the first 2 times I've died in on one of these theft missions. But anyways, to kind of return to the thing I was... Oops. Well, I'm boned. Actually, I wonder if I can autosave out of that one. But yeah, so when I talk about this perceived decline in terms of the types of stories that we're telling, one of the things that I need to allow for is that this is a side effect of the fact that the barriers to entry are so much lower. So the idea here is that, you know, we have self-publishing now. You know, we have lots of ways. I'm happy to see that. There's actually quite a few ways for stories to get out into the world. And of course, a more literate population. And so what's effectively happening is kind of the same thing as YouTube, which is there is absolutely a whole bunch of nonsense that's getting produced that is just not very interesting. Or it's very... I'm probably not doing myself any favors by killing the police, but I do need to lose the tail one way or another. Fortunately, I'm not on a timer. Alright. I hope you enjoy your dinner. Nearly logical. I'm hoping I don't perish this time around. At least we get the good combat music while we're on the run. Okay, so I'm hoping here that I can at least lose the police. And then if it comes down to Arasaka, I can deal with that on its own time. Nice. Oh, God damn it.
wipe them out yourself.
This might be a time that I just make a stand. But yeah, so we've got this idea that YouTube is somehow some just font of ignorance that's demolishing our culture. But the fact of the matter is, there's actually also some really good stuff on YouTube that we wouldn't have gotten any other way. So a good example of this would be something like epic rap battles of history, right? Those are quite well researched. Like, it's not just that they're clever, it's that they actually often have little puns or little references that really show that they bothered to put the effort into understanding the subject that they're covering. And so, whether or not people are actually learning something out of them, I mean, like, again, I always like to go back to my my experience with Civilization. Like, the first time I played Civilization, I did not have this like road to Damascus moment where I, conceived of all history and its importance. But what did happen was there were just enough seeds planted so that when I was ready to start pursuing these subjects seriously, I had some ideas about what to pick up. And again, is there a better way of doing that? I don't know, but it worked for me. And I have to imagine whether it's an Assassin's Creed or a, epic rap battles of history, or take your pick. There are going to be people that do actually wind up picking up those subjects, possibly in a way that they may not have, on their own. So. Oops. This is the sort of thing that I kind of need to, again, like, if I take a look at these types of stories, I can say that, it's never been easier to get some kind of creative work out there. And that's pretty much anything. Like, even, in terms of motion pictures, camera phones at this point can do very high quality images. And they have, I mean, for crying out loud, they have I don't know why I say phone cameras is what I mean. They also have the editing software on them at this point. So, like, there's really nothing stopping people from doing films, the quality of which, anybody in previous periods would have been astonished that they have almost, obviously a phone isn't free, but nearly costless access to. Getting the right lighting and stuff like that is still a challenge, and obviously you need to understand your craft well enough to be able to to make something meaningful. But this idea that it's it is not the same sort of investment to make a film the way it might have been previously, and obviously in those previous periods it was still independent work. Writing has never been easier. It's hard to get an audience. It's very hard to get an audience for just about everything nowadays. But in terms of writing, it's probably been never easier to do it, both in terms of obtaining the skills required, but also to produce something and put it in front of an audience. And even in terms of gaming, right? It's not just the low-cost game development engines, game engines like Unity or Unreal. But it's just the simple fact that programming has gotten so much easier. Like, if you don't want to use an engine like Godot, Unity, Unreal, you can actually use something like Python, and Pygame is a framework you can work with. And even if you don't want to do that, even if you want to do it like the old days where there weren't necessarily these commercial products available, all of the tools for development have gotten that much easier to use, and there are more libraries. There's basically more tech, and on top of that, you also have access through things like YouTube to be able to learn those skills in a way that it wasn't necessarily as easy to do in the past. So what this will mean is that there's just more of this stuff that happens. And so, a little bit like, YouTube or anything where these costs go down, because there are more people entering, and these are not necessarily going to be people who are top talents, you are going to see a rise in terms of the the lower quality stuff, and it generally gets ignored, as it should be. But the question is, do you also see an increase in terms of the high quality stuff? Now, for me, I'm on the fence about that. I'm actually not sure I can answer. I'm not sure I can answer in the affirmative. I don't necessarily think that we're in some, uniquely terrible period. That we should abandon any hope of good creative works. But I think Alan Moore was talking about one of the last League of Extraordinary Gentlemen comics, and I think he took what was it? It was, I think the example he said is like, he took the Beggar's Opera, oh God, what was the name of that? It had Mick Jagger in it. I hate that I'm blanking on this. So I'm just going to look it up. Performance, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Performance. Anyways, it's like a 1970s film. And Harry Potter. And so, if you plot these on a line, it's not necessarily that like Harry Potter's necessarily bad or something like that, but if you plot these on a graph, to him, the line isn't necessarily going up, and that, culture's becoming very repetitive, and that it is not necessarily capable of producing, a Beggar's Opera or Performance. Now, again, I mean, Alan Moore is not exactly the kind of person who gives, simple, uncontroversial statements. You may or may not agree with his diagnosis. But it is kind of interesting, right? Like, in some cases, if all that we are doing with this access to technology is allowing people to create more derivative works, and we're not seeing that improvement on the higher end, it does sort of invite the question, like, what exactly are we doing here? Like, what, is it a good thing that we've got this? And if it's, maybe asking if it's good that we have access to, or broader access to writing is maybe the wrong question, but perhaps you might want to get to some deeper questions in terms of the culture, which again either produces lots of dystopias or seems incapable of doing anything other than reference previous works. But the worry that I have, if I get too pessimistic about that, is that what I might be doing is just simply focusing too much on, on the lesser examples. I mean, it's a little bit like if you take a look at horror films, right? That's a genre that will include, Psycho and The Shining and Jacob's Ladder. Lots of very good horror films out there. But it's also, it's the genre that produces some of the most forgettable nonsense too, right? I always kind of like to think that science fiction's where you go if you want to make something like a demo reel for your computer-generated effects, and then horror is where you go if you want to make your demo reel for practical effects, better blood splatter or something. So, to me, I do think it's important to have those kinds of guardrails in place so that you don't get too pessimistic in terms of where the state of the world is, particularly in terms of creative industries. But I also think it's kind of important to ask those questions, and especially to challenge the assumptions like, we're seeing so many dystopias because, the world is just such a mess right now that it's all that we can think about. Because again, not to be too rosy or to, overstate the power of art or something like that. But, we do kind of expect art to uplift us, right? That we do kind of expect it to show us something higher, or teach us something about ourselves, and sometimes that isn't always a pleasant, a pleasant lesson or something that we always want to hear. And again, my view in terms of a lot of science fiction is that it's often a way of taking some of these unpleasant truths and putting them in a format that's easier to understand or a bit easier to accept than what we might be willing to see in a
Hey, V. Got a real sweet ride around these parts. How about you bring her over? Already know how it's done.
is this transferring funds or is it I won't question it. Anyways. But yeah, I think, when the artists are basically making excuses for not doing their jobs, I think it is worth taking the time to question whether or not that's actually what's going on. Now, I'm probably also a bad spokesman for this. One, because I don't do a lot of creative, or actually any creative writing, if I'm honest. I tend to write essays. But on top of that, I do tend to assign quite a bit of...
Beautiful. Get behind the wheel.
Hang on, gotta go.
Mais c'est à tout point! Faut craser Boudal!
I do tend to assign a lot of value to novelty and a lot of value to you running against the grain. So like, I don't like the idea of being contrarian for the sake of it. I do think you need to have a reason for going against the grain. But I also don't really like the kind of writing that is just telling people what they want to hear. I don't like the kinds of...
Just a request. Don't bang her up or I'll lose a buyer. Believe in you, Chumbata.
When I think of, or if it's, I like competent implementations of good things, but it is sort of nice to see, if you've got a creator that you like and they tend to do one thing very well, I always kind of have that sort of haunting fear that they're not challenging themselves, that they're sort of relying on some things that they know they have an audience for. And it does, to me, always kind of nag a little bit at this idea that is there something more that we're missing out on in the name of safety and security. And again, these are admirable things, right? I think a lot of people want that in their lives, so it's hard to begrudge. I'm not going to begrudge anyone their wish to, achieve some degree of comfort for themselves. But it is, you always do sometimes wonder about the counterfactual. So I also don't have a big moral or a big ending out of it, but I do. This is admittedly something that I've kind of had a bee in my bonnet for a while. I do. I think the thing that happens to me is that I very often take a look at, particularly in gaming, there's a lot of, there are a lot of calls for diversity, and it's very hard to look at that and say that that is a bad thing, right? My view is, whenever people are complaining about more games being on Steam, I think that is basically incumbents complaining about having to having to work harder to earn the money. And I would much rather more people be able to enter the market.
Oh yeah, I knew I picked the right merc for the gig. My man will take care of the rest. Little token of my appreciation's waiting for you in the drop locker.
I'd rather more people be able to enter the market at the expense of it becoming more competitive. And of course, I'm saying this purely as a consumer, right? Like that's there is a big bonus to me, and there's a big cost to the developer. But the thing is that the benefit of diversity, of course, is number one, the improved selection, right? You have more options available to you, and ignoring the new entrants is also an option. So essentially, it's the same or better. I mean, I think some people would say, the cost that's imposed by having to sort through the new entries is a cost that should be measured, and I'm not completely unsympathetic to it, but I'm not entirely sure that it's such a large cost that it alters the net positive. But on the other hand, what I think is true is that there are certain measures of diversity that people put a lot of attention on, and there is a considerable uniformity in terms of certain ideas. And this could be in terms of the game's business, this could be in terms of the types of games that get made, this could be, there are just, I think I'll put it to you this way. I think there are some ideas which, if you were to express them among a group of independent game developers, you would potentially, feel unwelcome. And I'm not talking about, there's obviously, there's a way that you can sort of code this to sort of sound like, you're someone who's just trying to go in and say something racist inside of a group. That is, I think everybody probably agrees that is a very silly example. It's, when people are going on about the AI, AIs, and how, what a terrible example it is that, there'd be 1 million people killed because you can't say a racial slur. I just don't think those are interesting or edifying examples. What I'm talking about more here would be I don't okay, actually here's a great example. I don't think I think Jean Riccatello has something good to say about AI. Okay. This is a statement that will not win you any friends in the I cannot get out of this. There we go. This will not win you any friends in the among game developers. I mean, even among game players, frankly. We could probably system collapse. Because it touches on all of the... Oh, that's actually really interesting that you can't kill the skull. Oh, maybe you can.
No mercy!
I'll deal with you later. But yeah, so you're dealing with John Riccatello, who's obviously, even though he doesn't work in games anymore, still a fantastically unpopular CEO. You're dealing with AI, which is something that I think for the most part you have a pretty hostile reaction to from people working in creative industries, rightly or wrongly. And of course you're combining these two. Now the funny thing is that the reason I picked that example is that John Riccatello basically said that he felt that the idea of using AI to replace something like artists was actually a very short-sighted way of looking at the contributions of AI.
He's mine!
Just need a minute. He was yelling that at full health. But yeah, I mean, his whole view on this, which was missed among the general anger at him and Unity, but his whole view was that essentially it was a short-sighted view to say that you could use AI to replace artists, and that I'm going to be sort of paraphrasing here, but that effectively what the technology does is it pushes out the frontier of what's possible. And so what you do is you, at the very least, keep your artists. And in my view, you actually expand the number of artists because, again, the possibilities of what you can do have expanded. And so it's an opportunity for you to build an even better game. And that would basically be what happened with the advent of lower cost game development tools. The overall employment in games went up, despite the fact that technically this technology should have made it possible to make the same games that were being made at the time with fewer people. In the end, just people's ambitions went up and they increased the number of people because they were able to make things that were much larger and ultimately made more money. At least for the largest games. Obviously, once indies got very crowded, people were finding it very difficult to make money. Now, my view is that he's basically right when he says that. I can't necessarily predict the future, but I actually think that is a decent read on both historically what has happened with similar technologies being introduced in that very industry. And I think it's also a good read on how AI can be effectively used, because I think people who want to try and replace a job probably aren't recognizing the fact that in order to replace a job, you need the AI to be able to perform every aspect of that job, and that's generally not what these things do. So an example I would take would be, I can use Copilot to come up with a database schema for me, and while I probably would need to give it a little bit of nudging in terms of working out things like foreign keys and all of that, it actually does a pretty good job of coming up with something like, I mean, this might just be a statement in terms of how bad I am at developing databases, but generally, large language models have done a pretty good job of coming up with a schema that is close to what I would do, sitting down and writing it all out. What I generally need to do with them is sort of direct it towards certain data types or get it to say, okay, well, this is, you should probably use a foreign key here, or so on and so forth. But of course, when you have a database administrator, it's not just, they don't just come up with the schema, right? That is one among several tasks, and I think it's fair to say that AI doesn't perform all of those functions at a level... Oh.
Hang on, gotta go.
But yeah, I'd say it's probably not controversial to say that it's not really at a point where you can have it completely perform every task for a database administrator. So essentially, if you want to try and replace your database administrators with a large language model, you better hope that you're good at those things that the LLM isn't. And I think generally the assumption that these technologies will be replacing these kinds of, will be replacing jobs. I don't mean to suggest that there will not be any kind of job replacement, but I think this idea that you can just fire all of your artists because, DALL-E exists, or Midjourney, or Scenario, probably doesn't, I think it betrays a certain ignorance in terms of what those jobs specifically do. So again, the point that I was pursuing was just this idea of things that you could not say in polite game dev company. Okay, it's be a bit challenging, but...
Clocks are ticking. Time waits for no Jew.
Thank you. Yeah, and like the thing that worries me is every time I say this stuff, I'm always worried about coming off as some kind of AI booster. I am actually quite skeptical about most of the claims I hear about it. I just don't like automatically taking, you know, the negative case as given. I think it's helpful to be thoughtful about these sorts of things. But yeah, the thing is that, you know, it is much easier to give certain perspectives, namely ones about, you know, the moral character of the former EA CEO and you know, this big bad technology coming to Earth. So, perfect example here. Actually, sorry, I'm going to go on another tangent here, but Apple's new iPad Pro, they had a, I thought, pretty good commercial where they take a number of creative tools and, you know, different figures in that. So these would be cans of paint, a piano, a metronome, a trumpet. And they go under an industrial press, smashes it all, and then when the press lifts, you have the iPad Pro, you know, highlighting the fact that it's the thinnest iPad up to and including the new iPad Air, and that it is packed in the capabilities of all of these things into the device. And if you look on the news, you know, this is Reuters, Canadian Press, National Post, I think the Wall Street Journal or Washington Post, I can't remember which one, but I also saw some, I think it was the Washington Post, and then Ad Age, all had articles on how Apple apologized after outrage at this commercial, and said that they would not broadcast it on television. And it's because a number of people saying that their artists found it offensive to see all of these creative things destroyed, and that it was sort of a representation of AI, which Apple is working on but hasn't actually really announced yet. Oh, this is no good. But yeah, they basically saw it as tone deaf, that, you know, ultimately you're seeing the destruction of creativity at the hands of AI represented in a commercial. Now, personally, I would have expected, if there's one group with media literacy, it would be the creative types. I will actually confess that I liked the ad probably for the reasons that people are mad about it. I actually felt a little sad seeing those things destroyed. Like, I love pianos. Like, I think they are really beautiful objects. Like, in some houses, I think at one point there was sort of the idea that the house is the most complicated machine. The piano is the most complicated machine in a house. I can believe that's true. Obviously now digital pianos are much more popular. But the thing is, like, if you think about it, when's the last time you have felt an emotion at a commercial, right? Yeah, it's highly impractical too. You know, like, if you think about it, like, you know, having that moment of shock or sadness, like, that is not something I frequently feel with a commercial. On top of that, you know, there's lots of YouTube videos of people pushing things in presses. So, you know, in the end, this is just the Apple, or, you know, a large company doing an even bigger version of a genre that is popular on YouTube. So, you know, again, like, seeing a camera and lenses, a metronome, a trumpet, paints, models, all of these things destroyed does make me feel something, and that feeling isn't always good, but I don't know, like, I think there's something kind of interesting in the fact, because I know when I see half of the stuff that Twitch shows me when the ads run, I feel talked down to and mad about that. Like, and not in a, like, there's an interesting emotion going on here with this little short film I saw, as in, what the hell do you take me for? Do you actually think I'm this stupid? So, yeah, I mean, in my opinion, it's actually quite a good commercial, and I think the fact that people felt something about it speaks to what a good commercial it is. I also kind of need to acknowledge that we live in a time when controversy is its own form of advertising, so it's entirely possible that this reaction was encouraged, and that the idea of not broadcasting it on television is a small concession for a much larger benefit in the fact that people are talking about the commercial. It did just make you go, yeah. I mean, let me know what you think of it, right? I don't mean to. I'm not trying to suggest here that this is like the worthy successor of the famous 1984 Macintosh commercial, right? Like, it's not. I'm not trying to say I had a profound moment, looking at this ad. But I will grant that it succeeded in doing something that no other commercial has been able to do in quite some time. And I do think it's interesting that it is specifically people who are saying they are, creatives, are the ones sort of saying you're not allowed to say that, because in general, I think that is a really bad place to be if you want to do interesting creative work. Again, having to accept the caveat that it is completely uninteresting to go for the usual hot button topics. Like, if you want to offend people, that is actually quite easy to do. You can be offensive by just going up and calling someone an asshole. There's nothing interesting about that, though. Offending people because you have said something that maybe strikes a little too close to their deeply held beliefs that haven't been questioned, that is the sort of thing that we've often expected from creative types. And this is the thing. I know I've been going on forever on this topic, but this is kind of where my worry in terms of this is where my worry of the dystopias and the quality of writing comes from, is that if we're in this point where, it's not because of some, government censorship organization, it's not because of the fear for our safety or the usual things that you kind of attribute to this recession in terms of the frontier of possibilities, but it's just us either feeling that we need to be entertained more, or that, our creative friends won't talk to us if we talk about this thing that's on our mind, or, polite people don't do that. There's any number of excuses that you can come up with not to tackle the things that have traditionally been very good subjects for art. And I do get worried at times that the types of debates that we have about, Apple can't show a piano being destroyed because that's a perfect metaphor for what AI is going to do to me. What, you used AI? Well, you're not a real artist. I mean, this is just reminding me of people who said that you're not a real photographer if you touch up your images using Photoshop. I mean, that's nobody agreed to that rule. That was just imposed by someone who didn't want to bother learning the tool. You don't like Apple, but the ad is good. It is visually pleasing, and your impression of it isn't we destroy art, but we change the tool. Yeah, I mean, that was my take on it, right? And yeah, like, I'm not looking... Yeah, just so I can be clear, not that I think this isn't... I don't think you felt to need this. I'm not looking for a statement of loyalty from Apple. I'm perfectly fine with Apple, but, like, I don't expect people to like that company. I know, especially among developers, a lot of people have some pretty strong feelings about Apple, and they're not positive ones. But I also like it when people give the devil their due. Not that I want to say that Apple's the devil. So I don't know. Like, it's a tough one because, again, there's a certain type of rhetoric that wants to sort of burden a particular argument. Again, when I talk about the things you can and can't say, inevitably this brings to mind, the lowest of the lowbrow YouTube provocateurs. But they're not interesting, and I don't think that they're doing something creative. But what I do tend to think of is like if you think of a figure like George, just because I talked about him before, if you think of a figure like George Orwell, right, who had plenty to say about fascism, was a socialist, and had the kind of courage of his convictions to write things that were very unpopular among socialists, and specifically to challenge the excesses that he saw in Stalinism. Right? This is a guy who went and fought in the Spanish Civil War. So I don't think anybody can accuse him of not being a true believer. And the question that I have is, how likely is it that we would produce an equivalent to Orwell at a time when people are and again, admittedly, it's probably a vocal minority, but vocal minorities, at least under certain iterations of Twitter, had kind of this outsized influence. I'm thinking of kind of the blow-ups at various newspapers. I think that's kind of fallen apart under the new ownership. I think that's just because a lot of people left. But it is interesting to see whether or not we are capable. There's actually this line I really like in The Americans when the Russian operatives are sort of discussing the current America and Reagan's president. So, I think they were referring, to the Republicans as the party of Lincoln, and he said to think they were even capable of producing a Lincoln. I guess it's a little bit like that. Like, would we be capable of producing an Orwell today when there is at least enough people to merit a news article? And again, creatives, people who we sort of expect to be kind of at the frontier of diagnosing the cultural moment and bringing expression to things that maybe the rest of us haven't quite seen yet. I realize this is sounding very kind of wanky, but I was also listening. I had a playlist on my music player, and Warm Leatherette came on, and I was like, this has got to be in reference to Crash. And sure enough, that was the inspiration for it. Apparently it was like a screenplay that was inspired by Crash, and the guy couldn't make it work, so condensed it into a song. Good song. But yeah, I mean, like, Crash is completely bonkers. But there's something compelling about it, and it's clearly inspired other things. And certainly J.G. Ballard is somebody who's held in great esteem now. I think even Crash is held in great esteem now, although, again, that is still a very strange book. And yeah, I don't know, like, where we go from, the group of people who produce works like Crash, who produce comics like Lenny Bruce or George Carlin or people like that, and now sort of raise enough of a stink about seeing the tools of creativity put into a press that there are multiple news articles I see about it today. It's just one of those little moments that makes me want, like, it does kind of give me a little bit of pause and say, like, are we creating conditions under which we get the best that we can out of creatives? And again, we'll see.
How'd someone like you end up here?
My owner bought me from some junk dealers, revamped, reprogrammed, and finally infused me with her spirit. Gape earth and this unhappy wretch entomb, or change my form whence all my sorrows come. The tree still planted in the unfinished part, not wholly vegetative, and heaved her heart.
Your programming sounds ancient.
What can I get you?
That was really fun, actually. I'm like 99% sure that is Ovid. Metamorphosis is like probably my favorite poem. At the very least, favorite epic poem for sure. Ovid is likely my favorite poet, although Milton's pretty good too. Anyways, thank you for those of you who are tolerating my proto Howard Beale rants. I realize it's a little funny to talk about what a drag it is that people, or that, you know, we overdo dystopia, and that we have at least a certain type of creative that wants to use, you know, life is hard today, that's why we write about dystopias, as an excuse. I realize that I have something of a bleak view myself when discussing these things, but I do want to focus on sort of what's going on inside of creative people's heads, because in the end, if we can't fix that, if we have such a narrow-minded creative group, I just don't necessarily know how we try and get in touch with some of those things that give us a reason to to reach a little bit further. At the very least, I'd like to see something to kind of counterbalance the other motivations we usually go for, such as, you know, status or money.
V, you're here. It's about time too. We're nearly done finalizing the plan.
Op not sitting well with you, Alex.
Reminds me of a few other sitches we handled. One in particular sticks out. Before NC, we worked in Op in Colombia. Medellin. Song's
Not
first
now,
mission.
Alex. We have enough to do without digging up ancient history.
What happened in Medellin? What was the op there?
We had our sights trained on a guy who sat on the Colombian president's back pocket. Sold him smuggled corp tech.
You saying the FIA pulls strings overseas?
A lot of what we do doesn't get printed in the norm sheets. Anyway, we used stolen identities on that mission too. Things didn't go exactly as planned, but that's a long story.
Think we can spare 60 seconds. Hell, might even learn something about Somi that'll prove useful.
All right. Our person of interest was one Luis Hernandez, arms trading heavyweight. We aim to plant our own SA in his organization. Alex had adopted the identity of an engineer from Hernandez's entourage. She was our ticket in. She walks in to attend a meeting one day. She sees one of Luis's bikini model girlfriends prancing out on her way to walk his Doberman. Spending big money on kitsch luxury was kind of his MO.
So what happened?
Well, Somi had put together Hernandez's dossier. Problem was, an important detail slipped through the cracks. The engineer's abject fear of dogs. Cold sweat, shaky hands, soggy pant leg, that kind of fear. When the Doberman sniffed Alex's knee, she pats him on the head and says, "Who's a good boy?" Then, she went to pull up a chair at Hernandez's table. Before she could sit down, they had two barrels to her head and one trained at the base of her spine.
What did you do?
Well, my hands are bound, got a sack on my head. Here a collapsible baton snap into place. Flack. I did what anyone would do in that sitch. I lied my fucking ass off. Don't sit quite straight to this day, though.
Okay, back to Night City, folks. With our sights trained on a new target.
Oh yeah, I forgot to get the data shards in Vic's place. Bargas subgroup, FIA operational recon in Dogtown. Bargas subgroup led by Ross Ulmer, engaged in smuggling operations. Contraband regularly includes arms, drugs, cyberware, and biohacking products. Large and well-armed group on site. Voodoo Boys, a subgroup led by netrunner Io Zarin, engaged in encryption of personal data running through the servers at the stadium. Provides regular net running and technological support to Barguest. Scavengers, a subgroup led by unknown, operational support needed, primarily engaged in arms trafficking. Contraband is transported under the guise of humanitarian aid shipments. Psychological evaluation, Colonel Kurt Hansen, 47326888215. Kurt Hansen, Colonel, ID 4732688215. Reason for evaluation, routine. Risk of cyberpsychosis, low. IQ above average. Danger to others, low. Danger to others, low. Danger to self, low. Commanding officer's note, an efficient and effective soldier, direct communication and natural rapport with subordinates has earned him their trust and respect, at times overly assertive with his superiors. Service record, reliable, consistent performance. To date, one incident on record, KD 1163, 1767. Or possibly XVII, but I'm going to assume that that's 17. Psychological assessment exhibits a moderate tendency for insubordination and individualistic behavior. Recommendation, maintain closer oversight from CO while broadening his scope of responsibility in order to foster a sense of mutual trust and commitment. Performance outlook, good. Recommendation for further evaluation, no.
We've parsed the intel from the shard Somi gave me. It's a solid foundation for the mission we want to run. Surveillance, recon, data gathering, planning, it's all done. It's high time we righted some wrongs of the past.
Fuck off, Reed. Give it a rest, will ya? Nothing here's your fault. Woman's an adult, made her own decisions. Consequences caught up to
No,
her.
she was manipulated. There was no one around who could have had her back. Here, V. Mission details on this.
Stop worrying, Reed. We'll get her out. Save her.
I know. And not just her. That goes for you, too. Right. Our objective. To free Somi from under Hansen's duress. Unfortunately, this ain't a normal rescue op. Because... well, she's been infected with something from beyond the Black Wall. A consequence of her service to the NUS and President Myers. I'm not about to pretend I understand the tech whys and how. The important thing is, if she doesn't get treatment, it'll kill her.
The cure is an AI that lives on a neural matrix. Hansen possesses said matrix now. We aim to seize it.
So this neural matrix, how much do we know?
Experimental tech nested in a mainframe that someone dragged up from deep beneath Dogtown. From a bunker, to be exact. Part of Project Cynosure, a joint U.S. Militech operation mounted in a bid to counter Arasaka's Soul Killer. The Matrix itself is a functional container. It houses an AI from beyond the Black Wall, and its design lets the user deploy the AI for a specific purpose. In our case, to fix you and Songbird.
All right. Plan. Let me hear it.
Hansen to meet with the net runners you already know. The meeting itself is our chance to get close. To Song and the Matrix. Hansen hired the French duo because they worked for Militech years back. They know its security protocols inside out.
Also, they're selling Hansen access codes. Handy when Songbird goes to extract the Matrix from the Cynosure mainframe. Hansen's gunning for data from what he knows was a secret Militech NUS research project. He has no idea the neural matrix is in there too. Runners, scans, and behaviorals we have. Now we just need to take those twins out of the equation.
Emmerich and Aurora Cassell. We know anything more beyond what we saw firsthand?
Yep. Songbird put together full profiles for both. Super short brief. They got their start at Militech and dove in deep. That is, till they learned the pay's better on the dark side.
Yeah, I buy that. Sure didn't hide their love of Eddie's.
Mm-hmm. Gonna miss that next paycheck, because they ran into us. We're gonna nab them before they reach Hansen.
So we kidnap them. How we want to do this?
They're driving a rental while in NC, an exploitable opening. We're gonna track their ride and hijack it before they reach Hansen at the stadium. That's where you come in, V. We'll need you to breach the rental firm's tracking system. Alex will fill you in later. Once we have the runners, you'll take their place. The behavioral imprints are tuned already.
And you're rolling all this, Reed?
I'm drawing up your exfil route. Once you complete the mission, you need to get out in a hurry. I'll provide transport, make sure the path's clear and problem-free.
Brings us to the final stage, right? Meeting with Hansen.
Right. Where you'll sell him the access codes to the mainframe. In other words, Key to unlocking your medicine cabinet. One of you will join Somi in the lab to feed in the codes when needed. Hansen's likely to keep the other at his side. Collateral.
I'll stay with Hansen, you'll join Songbird. Once the data floodgates are open, you'll signal me. Gonna disarm Hansen, take him and his guards out.
Hansen and his goons. Aim to handle them on your own?
Can do a lot more than play dress-up, thank you. Plus, element of total surprise in my corner. Still, sweet of you to worry.
Sounds like Flatline and Hansen set in stone.
Order came directly from Myers. Confirmed at this stage. He took a potentially lethal swipe at the president of the Anywhere.
And Songbird?
We have to rescue her. Myers told you as much herself. All clear? If you have any questions, now's the time to ask.
First step. What was it again?
Securing a trace on the Netrunner's car. This bit's on you. Alex will expand on that in a minute. Meanwhile, we'll make sure the personality data and imprints are airtight.
Main goal. Want to make sure I'm clear.
It's bringing Songbird free from Hansen's iron grip. And seizing tech that's gonna save your lives. You and Alex enter the stadium as Hansen's visiting Netrunners. Disguise is our key to the op.
How much have you told Myers? What's she know?
That Somi's fallen into the hands of the man who'd organized the downing of Space Force One.
Is that all?
All for now.
Things couldn't be clearer. Let's get to work. So, time we talk nabbing the runners?
Cover that in a minute.
She's gonna tell me something about Solomon, I bet.
Myers doesn't know the deets of this op, does she? Never will. Is that right?
It's not wrong.
So we serve Hansen up on a silver platter. It'll be salutes and handshakes. Shit goes sideways, we're royally fucked.
Welcome to the agency.
You know Reed better than I do. What he thinks. What's his true aim here? Saving me or carrying out a mission?
Saul imagines he's responsible for her. Always has. Thinks he's responsible for all of us. Hell, even for you, I bet. It's how he keeps his grip on reality. Life. With mixed results, mind you.
And me?
Same story as always. Dares, lands neck deep in shit, somehow crawls out. Rinse and repeat.
And any for your thoughts, Alex? About all this?
Honestly, still wondering why neither of us went back to DC. Not me, not Reed.
They put him to sleep. Saddle you with a Dogtown assignment.
Who are you kidding? Say we disobeyed orders, gone back. A dressing down by some bureaucrat would be the worst we'd have had to endure. Think we were both waiting for something, like the downing of Space Force One. Probably makes us a sad fucking pair of hypocrites.
Intercepting the runners. How do we do that?
They're driving a rental. Plans to break into the rental service system. Karen Exotics. Specializes in rare models. Karen has tracking stations around the city. Gain access to those, we find the car easy. There's a station not far, near Pacifica Serenity Bible Church. Check it out.
The stations. How do they work exactly?
They ping vehicle IDs across the network, monitor location, tire pressure, all of that. Hack them, and it'll be open season on the runners.
Find it hard to believe taking one station will be enough. Rental agencies got rare rides to protect.
See if I can find more info. If the one's not enough, we'll improvise.
So, breach the station, trace the car. Good. What then?
Use this little doodad. It'll pop the locks on the doors, let you take complete control from the trunk.
Dunno. Anything goes wrong, I'll be stuck in there.
Suck it up. This is FIA trunk ops, soldier. Seriously, though, the tech just works. And we'll have your back the whole way.
Sounds simple enough.
Tech worth tens of thousands can help any plan go off like a dream. When you think you're near a station, scan your surroundings. They're not concealed. Shouldn't be tough to spot.
Get right on it.
I've said this like a million times, but I am a sucker for a good spy story, which is definitely what this counts as. So like when you know, the music comes up and you see all the dossier coming up in front of your eyes and hear the plan, like that's just the sort of stuff that I eat up. But there was one thing that really interested me about this briefing, which I didn't really think about. Like, it's been introduced before, but I didn't really think all the way about, and it's an interesting idea. One of the things that I tend to like about some of the good cyberpunk adventures or stories, and when I say cyberpunk adventures and stories, I mean specifically in the 2077 setting, although there are other games, other settings that are capable of doing similar things. But...
B, heads up. I can't talk long, but two things, quickly. First, good news. I managed to upgrade your relic's firmware. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Don't worry, completely painless.
Relic upgraded. How'd you manage it? No easy feat, I guess, tweaking tech that advanced.
Let's say I've had extra time on my hands. More than I expected.
Don't worry. We're getting you out of there.
I know.
First, good news, you said. Is there a second thing?
Right. It's super important. Stays between us. It's gotta. Proof of my trust. I'm sending you coordinates. Come after dark. We should be able to talk freely. Okay, need to Delta. Let's see you soon.
Okay, we're definitely waiting to talk to Songbird before we begin the mission. In order to pass the time, I'm going to try and find that item that just dropped. But yeah, so there is actually something that interested me more than just the... Okay, let's not start a fight. The other thing that caught my attention is this idea when they talk about the neural matrix, and specifically this idea that this is a technology that Songbird got from behind the black wall. So it's always kind of interesting. I know this usually comes down to what people call world building, and it's a feature that I definitely think has come up in a number of science fiction and specifically cyberpunk stories that I really like. And it's kind of interesting to hear, let's say, the origins of some of these ideas compared to what people grab onto as maybe the most important or most influential idea. So I'm gonna approach this topic about Songbird kind of the long way around, as is my way, really. But I want to sort of talk about the context in which it comes up. So there's I talked about Snow Crash earlier, and apparently one of the ideas that inspired Snow Crash. You know what? There isn't a drop, so I don't see why I should risk myself. Maybe I'll get somewhere high to... I also don't know if there's a timer on them, so it could be that this is already a lost cause. But I'll do my best. So in the case of Snow Crash, I think the idea of something like the metaverse was this effort to kind of capture what happened with television. Sort of, televisions originally weren't very good, and there weren't a lot of options, and they were also very expensive. But as certain shows became popular, they became something that was a bit more important to have, and then maybe there's some incremental changes in terms of costs. But the effect was that you see more and more development that goes in. Not only do the televisions get better, they get cheaper. And of course, that leads to further advances in terms of the types of stories that are being told and sort of the new... I mean, I suppose the more modern way of describing it would be TV's killer app. So apparently a lot of the ideas of sort of the metaverse and such in Snow Crash basically are sort of this effort to try and say, well, what would that look like? We already have the TV, so what would that look like today? And ultimately, I mean, it was mostly in terms of computer technology, because I think it had its origins in sort of a graphic novel that was supposed to be designed on a computer and ultimately never materialized. Just trying to think how I might want to spend the time. Well, we can try and I guess we can try and meet. Oh, here's what we'll do. I will try and meet. I'll try and meet with Misty, and if I don't, then I think I'm just going to go for the other. I'll go for the other tarot cards. So anyways, obviously this is an example of sort of a creator sort of taking a piece of technology and trying to extrapolate forward. We maybe didn't really get the virtual reality world that he was talking about, but certainly there were some pretty significant advances in terms of graphical fidelity, and again brought on by entertainment, right? Like you've got Doom, and then you have this arms race in terms of graphics, the ability to render more and also to make more efficient use of the existing hardware that's already there. And then of course this leads to NVIDIA innovating the GPU, and the GPU is now being used for more than just rendering high resolution aliens. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked. All right, let me get back on track. So returning to this idea of so anyways, one of the things that I kind of like about this is that the more, I think there's a thing that was said in terms of H.G. Wells and how he wrote science fiction. I'm definitely going to get myself... tried to be nice about it. Anyways, so, again, Wells, I think Wells described his approach as sort of having this one fantastic assumption. And then essentially everything else surrounding it is sort of based in reality, or based on as much reality as you can, based off of the that one fantastic assumption. What if people could fly, right? Well, that's clearly doesn't happen. But once you allow the what if, what would the commute look like? Would we have the need for return to office? Would cities be taller or would they be wider? And there's plenty of historical examples you can sort of look at to try and create a certain degree of authenticity for that. I actually find that a slightly more interesting way to create believable worlds than some of the approaches of fantasy, which are like, okay, it isn't the Siege of Vienna, but let's face it, it's the Siege of Vienna, and each of these fantasy races are sort of stand-ins for these nations, and but instead of coming clean about this, let's now have... Actually, you know what? I think this might actually be coming from... There's an essay about world building in Alexis Kennedy's book. I think actually it is the essay called Against World Building, now that I think of it. So I'm unintentionally plagiarizing. But no, like it's a really good example, I think, where you've got this history that's being used, and it's not bad to use the history, but if all you're doing is sort of transposing it, you don't really need to have the extra stuff, right? I think people are familiar enough with that convention that you don't necessarily need to do all of the associated quest logs or whatever to explain how this world works. Whereas if you consider sort of something like what Wells was describing, where again, you have something unbelievable or something that hasn't happened, but you then sort of work through the rest of that. I think it creates the things that people admire when they talk about quote-unquote good world building. And I think the result is more satisfying. Like, H.G. Wells is a wonderful writer in my view. So this is why I find some of the things that I don't think get covered enough when people consider approaches for something like Cyberpunk. Trauma Team, I think, would be a really interesting. In fact, particularly if you want to run like a campaign with a role-playing group, Trauma Team.
Oh yeah, I knew I picked the right word for the gig. My man will take care of the rest.
Is basically a storytelling gift, because like one of the most reliable genres of television show for so long has been like doctor and cop shows, right? So just, take your favorite doctor show. Man, actually, here's a good one. Somebody who's better at being a game master than me can come up with. Could you do Trauma Team House, right? The Hugh Laurie television show. Wouldn't that be something? But yeah, I mean, like the fact that you have so many doctor shows suggests that there should be no end of adventures that you could go on with Trauma Team. But I don't actually tend to hear people talking a lot about Trauma Team based campaigns. Medias in the Cyberpunk setting, I think, are really interesting, and we only usually get to see them as sort of these figures that are NPCs in our adventure, as opposed to being somebody we focus on. And yet you have an example of something like Transmetropolitan by Warren Ellis, where there is a main character who's a journalist. So, you've got this developed world, and you potentially have the possibility for some really interesting stories that go outside the kind of the more well-trodden paths of cyberpunk stories. But the one that really caught me about that briefing, I am actually finally getting to that point now. This idea that there is this technology that's been obtained from behind the Black Wall, specifically by Somi, and there's a number of things that really fascinate me by that. Because, you have Soul Killer, right? You have this technological edge that Arasaka has built for itself. And of course, its long-hated enemy, Militech, wants to compete. But there's this interesting idea that, there's a certain part of the internet that has now been blocked off. You have NetWatch sort of protecting the broader world from this, wild west of AI that's been allowed to sort of develop without any kind of control. Like, it's almost, like you've got this very thin barrier. It's the cyberspace version of how we tend to think about, Earth on a sufficiently cosmic scale, right? Like, there's the great beauty and majesty that comes from seeing that photograph of Earth from space. But then there's also that sort of reflection that the atmosphere looks remarkably thin, and that is basically the thin blue line, if you will, between something completely inhospitable, something that would not instantly, but like something that is certain death to us if we're exposed to it. It's just this very hard to define, very hard to describe in some cases, layer between that and effectively an infinite existence that is utterly indifferent to. I mean, this is the premise of Lovecraftian horror, right? Cosmic horror. That there's that little thin line that's essentially the thing that is giving us this illusion of importance, and if that is pierced in some way, we're basically gone before we can even think about it, and there's nothing else out there to care. Happy Friday, everybody. So the Black Wall almost has kind of this idea, right, that the world as you know it, all of this reliance that you have on reliable communication and the interface with technology, one that is far more invasive than what we have today, right, in the form of cyberware. The Black Wall is kind of that defense, but there's also that temptation that because, whatever's on the other side there is also sufficiently advanced that you might be able to get an edge. And so you have this idea of operatives who go behind the Black Wall to try and get something to compete. And again, it's not something I would have necessarily thought about in terms of the setting, but there's a really interesting idea there. Or maybe I'm just too easily amused. I don't know. But I like being easily amused. It means I find more things fun. So I suspect I'm not going to be able to do the mission. But I'm hoping that maybe we can talk with Somi before we wrap up for tonight. Okay, let's see if Misty's willing to have a chat with me. Not ready to chat with me. Fair enough. Okay, I'm gonna go try and find some more tarot cards. I keep getting this wrong. So I'm going to do a little tarot hunting. I don't exactly want to specifically hunt all over the map, but I also don't want to... I don't know. It'd be kind of fun if we ran into them naturally. We'll see how well it goes. Who are you calling jackass? Nope. I'm not going to turn down a chance to do some thieving.
I want to have some fun. You're the man I need. Oh, yes. Yes. Make me feel better.
Time for a flashback! Hey, B. Trim your wheels, huh? You the delivery address.
Sorry. So I might have a fighting chance to avoid the police. Oh, nope, they're gonna come after me. Damn it. No. Okay, I think I gave him the slip. I really hope I am about to trigger the police again. Damn it.
One more thing. You hear that? Clock's a ticking.
Oh, this
Time
is
waits for no
not good. Okay, I think I can make it. Some assembly required. We should be good on timing, but I don't want to take anything for granted, especially if I wind up smacking into another police officer. Okay. Sorry, I know I've been ranting about so many things and then I just kind of went quiet now, but where I can, I'm trying to focus on at least a couple. No! Damn it! That's on me for not being a little more attentive on the steering, but as long as I don't that's what I was specifically trying to avoid. I have a real chance of being able to shake them in time for the reward. I'm glad that they're not asking about the condition of the car, though. It wasn't pretty, but did the trick. Part of this is just getting both enough money and enough... Oop, overburdened. So part of this is about just getting enough money and enough discounts to buy the most expensive cars in the lot. Of the lot. And then, I don't know, like the rest should be pretty straightforward. I won't necessarily need to do the thefts to make it work. So the usual algorithm I have here is to... Now I'm curious why I've got the... I must have got other iconics, because we definitely dropped a few of these off last session. So what I want to do here is first scrap anything that isn't tier 5 plus. Unless I genuinely don't have any replacements, but I think at this point we've got 5 plus of everything. Should probably be selling these for cash at this point, actually, but... Okay, I'm gonna stick with that.
It's 98.7 body heat.
Guess who? So, next race is practically in my backyard, which means I need to make sure folks around here know I walk my talk. Meet at the corner of Brandon and Wolson. Give me a call when you get there. Of course, Claire, let's give them hell. I'm not opposed to doing Beast and Me, but we can save that for... We can save that for the future. I'll confess, I actually tend to like the noisier songs on the soundtrack, but it's really hard for me not to associate this song with the Venus and Furs mission, just because I was so surprised. I mean, I should have known that we were going to the hotel, but like, I was genuinely expecting to get another job, and I didn't get a job. I really like this part of the map. I don't know, like I drove by it and almost always ignore the scenery, but it's always kind of neat to drive into that. I think it's just because of the lighting effects that reflect the roof. Okay, as tempted as I am to try and go and steal another car, I'm gonna head towards that tarot card. Ah, neat. The Emperor. I should have guessed that that would have been the Konpeki one. Alright. It's not that one. The Emperor. The Emperor represents patriarchal control and is pleased with the authority and power he possesses to shape the future. The Emperor makes the rules and enforces them for the common good, but prestige has its dark sides. The Emperor is dominating and ruthless and will climb over a mountain of bodies to achieve his aim. Okay, I think I have enough time for another tarot card. Let's see if we can find one. Well, there's one on the other side of town. I mean, I could also go out to... Does this count as Badlands? I guess it does. I mean, I don't have a ton of options, so... So we're getting ready to wrap up. I think I might have somebody who I can host at the end of this, but I did spend a lot of time talking and specifically projecting opinions out into the world, especially about creativity, which is something that I think people have a lot of opinions about, often different opinions from mine, and so I also wanted to give people a chance to have the last word, or perhaps maybe just a word in edgewise, but however you want to define it. Alright, I'm glad they gave me an out for my foolishness. But yeah, whether it's related to what we were talking about before, or just in general, what you think maybe makes a good story, how well we're handling creative challenges today, whether we're taking on interesting creative projects, or if we're maybe we've let a few skills atrophy that we might have had before. I think there's a few reasons why I find it an interesting topic, but it's also one that I actually like hearing other people's views on. I think it's mostly because I have I guess I'm at least self-aware enough that I know most people probably are not going to look up to me or ask me for advice on creativity. So one, it's always nice to hear other people's views rather than just project your own if it's not something that you're sort of accepted as a quote-unquote thought leader on. But I also think, equally importantly, like, I guess one of the premises of diversity is that, you know, there's no one group that has all the good ideas.
You're listening.
That ultimately you would want, if you can, like, you would want, I think this is where Johnny and Rogue have a date. They're not going to let me... Oh wow, they're really strict about letting me in. Alright, we'll see if I can... It's definitely not in that room. Unfortunately, I also don't have a lot of guidance in terms of where it is. Maybe it's just not worth... maybe it's just not worth hunting down. I can get to the part of the story that requires it. Although it's weird because if you look... Okay, no, it does push that ahead. Excuse me. So that's not it. That easy. Again, one I probably should have recognized. The Lovers. The Lovers is the chord of dichotomies. It points to the contradictions that clash within each of us and of the challenge of striking balance between extremes. The Lovers is also the card of dilemmas, like the fool who stands at the crossroads, unable to make his choice. Anyway, sorry, the point that I was going to try and say and then lost in the course of the game. I guess because there is this idea that all of the good ideas are not sort of localized in one group, it is one of these cases where I think you can see very directly the benefit of getting other ideas in terms of creativity, creative processes, what works, what doesn't. There's definitely a lot of, I mean, there's a cottage industry of, you know, whether they're books on writing or, you know, if it's I don't know. The writing books are the ones, because I really enjoy writers on writing. So like Stephen King's got a good book on writing. Ursula Le Guin has one. Gwyn has one. David Mamet is pretty good. So Three Uses of the Knife, Bambi versus Godzilla on directing. Obviously on directing isn't about writing, but Three Uses of the Knife I think is his screenplay one. But yeah, there's a few good like books by writers on writing that are very enjoyable to read, and they're not really formulas, but it is just kind of interesting to hear a little bit about how they solve the problems that they do. But then there's a much larger section of the writing, like books on writing, which are written by people who don't really have a whole lot of standing. And that's fine. I mean, like sometimes you can, you don't necessarily have to be a successful author to have interesting things to say about writing. But what I tend to find is that they're basically self-help books, but, labeled in such a way that, people who don't normally think of themselves as like self-help readers can sort of, there's the plausible deniability, I guess. And I find those actually uniquely unedifying books to read. I tend to get mad when I actually find out that I'm reading one that I thought was something different. Which again is a shame, because I actually really do like reading writers I like talking or writing about writing. But you can't have it all, I guess. But in any case, I do know in a lot of cases, because this genre of book exists, these conversations do sometimes wind up being people repeating things that they've heard from other people, as opposed to discussing things that really work for them, right? So I do have some thoughts in terms of what works for me in terms of writing fiction, but the fact of the matter is that I want to write more fiction than I actually do, so I need to be a little careful in terms of how readily I share what I think works.
Roger. Probably some cyber psycho again, but I'll handle it. Say, any update on my overtime bonus? Dispatch?
Let's see if I can run out the clock here. But yeah, so obviously there's not a lot of value in...
All units in the area, order has been restored. All units instructed to return to patrol.
If the conversation just winds up being repeating these lines from other sources, then, there isn't a lot of value there. Just go and read those original sources. But it's also true that despite all of the advice, despite all of the writing on writing, despite all of this discussion, it's also fair to say that people really don't know what works, right? William Goldman had basically everything he ever wrote about Hollywood always had this this repeated mantra, nobody knows anything. And I mean, this is the guy who wrote The Princess Bride and Marathon Man and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Like, presumably, if somebody knows the formula for success, it would be someone like William Goldman. And even he kind of concedes that, it's not necessarily the case that there may be a film industry, there may be people who make a living writing and making movies, but nobody knows where the next hit comes from. I think that's one of the reasons why it's sometimes interesting to hear outside views on these. Also, it's kind of nice to just hear what conventional opinions are, because I very clearly go off on my own thing at great length. The Hanged Man. The Hanged Man is the card of sacrifice. It says that a price must be paid in order to achieve enlightenment. The Hanged Man's forsakenness opens the path for rebirth into a new life, though this path is wrought with pain, suspended in time, and ultimately ends in death. All right. I think I am done for tonight. First of all, I wanted to take a second and thank everybody for hanging out. Seasent, Nearly Logical, Tiberiosity, I know you were lurking. Cured, I hope you are continuing to enjoy... hope you're continuing to enjoy Disco Elysium. I think we had Aegis Sounder here for a little bit, but I don't think I saw more beyond the Sanskrit texts. But yeah, obviously I was reconsidering the Friday streams, and you know, it wasn't a huge turnout tonight, but it was like there was a little bit more life, which I was happy with. So I am gonna try and host. So Missing the Stars is playing Sonic Frontiers, so I think I will pass you off to her. But yeah, Yessie is somebody who I met through another broadcaster, but is somebody who's been doing quite a bit of her own and actually has a great love of Sonic. So I'll leave you in her capable hands. I'm going to be back on Monday. We might do more Dead Space if it comes down to that. Again, I'm not 100% sure on where I'm going to be with the old world troubles that I've been running into. But again, we'll save it for when we know what's going on. Just a reminder that on Wednesday I am double booked. I'm going to be meeting up with an old prof, and then I will also be oh, that's a first. I don't think I've seen the console sign for that. Anyways, doesn't matter. But yeah, I'll be meeting up with a prof, and then I'll be going to the local game dev meetup. So if I don't see you on Monday, I'll see you all in a week. Until then, have a lovely weekend. Take care. We'll see you in the next one.